We're thankful that they're in the playoffs. The vibes of the city and of the province are high. People are feeling good. And you wake up and you see this and just say, you sigh and you say there are so many other things we could be talking about, focusing in on, but we're not. We're talking about Go Habs Go, and it's just a bit ridiculous across the board.
I think that's fair to say, a bit ridiculous across the board. That's Liberal Lemonade Greg Kelly, who was on earlier this afternoon. James Mennie is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, what do you make of this whole fiasco, if you will?
Oh, come on now. All this faux outrage from all the NNAs. Oh, it's so terrible. I love how the PQ, seeing how stupid the CAC made itself look, jumped on the bandwagon for Go Habs Go, right? And they've been using it in their hashtags. But listen, when Francois Legault was shilling for Bill 21 when it first came out, he had this little catchphrase. I don't know if you remember it. Au Québec, c'est comme ça qu'on vit. In other words, that's how we live in Quebec.
Right.
And what happened today, and whether it's the Go Habs Go, or whether it's Pastagate, or whether it's a business being harassed because, I don't know, it's got a word that got some Anglophobe's nose out of joint. The reminder is anybody who feels like, going after English Quebec, English Montreal, can do so, and do so successfully, thanks to a government agency that exists for no other reason than to basically investigate and confirm what we can only refer to in these parts as des niaiseries, okay? And to turn around and say, this is how we live in Quebec. And it will happen again, Aaron. I absolutely guarantee it's going to happen again. And you know what? Will it wind up in the New York Times? Will it wind up in the international press? Guess what? No one will care. And when I say no one will care, I'm not just talking about the chattering classes or the MNAs. I'm talking about Quebecers, Francophone Quebecers, who are beginning to remind me a lot of the people who voted for Donald Trump down in the States, right? Or more importantly, the people who stayed home and didn't vote in the last presidential election. They're the first ones to turn around and say, when Trump goes nuts, they go, that's not who we are. But they're quite happy, to sort of hide behind the Trump administration, the way most Quebecers in these last two elections were happy to hide behind the CAC, despite the fact they made it very clear exactly who they are, exactly what they were in business to do. What I find fascinating as well, Aaron, is that this complaint, even though it was aimed at the STM, and by the way, before we go, I also want to give a huge tip of the hat to Andy Riga of the Montreal Gazette, who broke this story. It was Andy Riga who I think 10 years ago did a series of stories about the STM, because the STM was claiming that because of Bill 101, their ticket takers were forbidden to speak to the public in English, which the OQLF, or the OLF, I guess, back then, flat out denied. It was a complete falsehood. So be careful as well when you're talking about a story that involves the use of English and the STM. They are really love to adhere as quickly as possible and as broadly as possible to any directive from the OQLF. But when Francois Legault doesn't have the spine to stand still and talk to reporters about this, when Jean-François Roberge turns around and says, let the OQLF do its job, it's not my problem, they know perfectly well that sooner or later this will blow over. If French media are paying attention to this, Aaron, the only reason for it is because it involves the Habs. End of story. This story will be over, and I absolutely guarantee you that all of the federal party leaders who have proclaimed how important it is to protect the French language and culture in Quebec will not be asked whether or not getting rid of the expression "Go Canadians Go" on a Montreal bus is going to help protect the French language.
By the way, it's interesting you mentioned French media, right? Because I checked this morning after reading the Gazette story, and the story was there, front page. Now, if you go to the Journal de Montréal's website, you have to kind of scroll down to the bottom of the page to find the same story.
Same thing with La Presse. La Presse, actually, to their credit, TVA picked it up very quickly. They gave us a good play in the morning. They got some reaction from the political class, but this is going to die and quite frankly, when you really look at it, it's an absurd story. It's just another example of how absurd Francois Legault's Quebec is in fact. But my point is, it's as we say, this is how we live in Quebec. This is how we will live in Quebec. So long as Francophone Quebecers find this normal, get used to it. If they turn around and say, no, it's good, but no. You voted for this. okay? And you'll vote for it again. You've made it quite clear where you stand on the excesses of the language legislation, on the excesses and the targeting of the normalization of discrimination in Quebec society with Bill 21, and indeed Bill 96. Don't turn around and say this has got nothing to do with you. This has got everything to do with you. This is who you are. Wear it. Get used to it. Because as I say, this is not the last time you and I will be talking about a really ridiculous, stupid story like this.
You mentioned some of the people, the opposition leaders who spoke. Did you happen to hear Eric Girard today, Jim?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So that part about shifting the thing to talking about Quebec hockey players, that he's really proud of?
So listen,
pretty great dodge, I thought.
Yeah, the only thing that didn't happen today, which normally does, we didn't hear the expression overzealous inspectors.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, which basically means this is what they do, and this is what they will do. And the fact, and frankly, even in French, it was so funny because I decided to look up, because when I was growing up, I don't know about you, buddy. I grew up in a francophone neighborhood, and when you would go to a hockey game, right, and the parents are there cheering for the kids, I used to coach a little triple Adam A hockey, and they go, vas-y, 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 means go on, and you didn't hear go. And then as I got older, go sort of made its way, and in fact, when I was working cops, you'd be listening to the scanners, right? And the thing was, when an operation was underway, they'd be saying, boss, donne-moi le go. It's like, tell me when we're moving, give me the green light. It's a part of Quebec French au bout, as we say in these parts. And the fact that this is even a story, as I say, is a monument to the pettiness, the absurdity, and the absolute complicity of Quebec in what is becoming an increasing embarrassment for many people here, but unfortunately for not enough of the population in this province.
But don't you think, at the end of the day, and I asked listeners about this, and I'll do it again when we're done, to hear the premier at some point at the end of the day, now, whenever, actually come out, answer the question, and pretty much go along with what everybody else has said, which is simply, you know what, there are better things to do or more important things to do. Go Habs Go is okay. Is it too much to expect that?
He's basically bet the farm on protecting Quebec identity, no matter how absurd that protection may seem. So, and he's terrified of that, and that's why I think the PQ is having fun today, saying, "Yeah, we got no problem with Go Habs Go," simply because the CAC have made themselves look even more ridiculous than usual. As I said yesterday, this is a government that can't do anything well, and now even here is making itself look increasingly ridiculous with what is its holy grail, which is the theoretical protection of Quebec identity. In other words, keeping people scared of immigrants, English, and anyone who doesn't look or sound like you. So you know what? I think we're going to have some really, when I mean me, we, I mean you, me, and the listeners, we're going to have some really interesting times after this federal election. Because it's going to be interesting to see, given how the vote breaks in Quebec, whether or not this kind of garbage will be able to continue if the public mood, as we see who they vote for, and how highly they support, how can I put it, so-called federal parties to the detriment of the Bloc Québécois, let's say, maybe the tone will change. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I have a sneaking suspicion that we're living in two Quebecs, the one that gets reported on in mainstream corporate media, and the biggest proponent of which is owned and operated by a former leader of the PQ, and a real Quebec where most people, especially when you get off the island of Montreal, Aaron, trust me on this, it's like a different planet. And no, not because everyone speaks French, it's because no one gives a damn. The stress, the wanting to strangle a total stranger, I don't find it. And I've been living out here now for 5 years. And I was a little nervous. I thought for sure, because I'm bilingual, but I speak in English to my wife. No, jamais, pas un mot. And everyone is it's just completely different. So we'll see what happens after the 20th.
By the way, just sort of tying into this, there's a victory, if you want to call it that, for McGill and Concordia today, Jim. Don't know if you heard the story, but we had a Quebec judge basically say the decision to increase tuition 33% for out-of-province students off the boards. He's saying it's not, apparently at least for the time being, will not take effect. The government's going to have 9 months to revise their fee structure. So we take that as a win, I guess.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, if the government appeals that to the Court of Appeal, which Francois Legault has publicly questioned their impartiality, because, Aaron, they're named by the federal government, as was the judge who came down with the ruling today. It's also interesting to note that yesterday, when a motion was made that Quebec should have a much larger say in the nomination of Court of Appeal justices and of Superior Court justices, which is now the purview of the federal government, it was adopted unanimously in the National Assembly, i.e., the Quebec Liberal Party figures, why not? Let's get on that bandwagon as well. So we'll probably find out more about that down the road.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
The Matt.